When something you love gets bashed over and over again, it gets tiresome and you kind of want to defend it. This was all tiresome from the day that the game was initially reviewed. I'm talking about Castlevania 64 and all of the unnecessary hate it has received over the years. There's a hive mind mentality when it comes to not liking this game, and the major issues are all of the ridiculous expectations and comparisons that never made sense to me. Now, I know it's not the most hated game out there, but far too many people are still complaining about it, especially Castlevania fans, and I'm going to talk about the many complaints and, well, attempt to defend why none of it really holds any ground. It's easy to blame online personalities in the past decade or so, putting extra emphasis on how bad this game is, mainly the angry video game nerd.
It just sucks.
I understand there are a few factors to cover. One I could possibly see as a rational issue are the controls, but I'll get to that. Other hate that just baffles me, the soundtrack. Are you kidding me? And I'll get to that too.
The music sucks.
The hate started way back. Let's go to 1999. So, remember GamePro magazine? Well, I do. The reviewers used goofy names and avatars, but one in particular I still remember to this day, Boba Fett. This bastard bashed Castlevania Legacy of Darkness, and I'll never forget that. Castlevania was released, and a year later an updated version, this Legacy of Darkness, it added extra content, and many swear it's the better version of the two. Well, that was released as well, but neither of these games ever got glowing reviews back then. They got mediocre or just straight up bad reviews. Personally, I prefer the original version of the game. It's the one I grew up with, and, well, I love that opening track. It's not in Legacy of Darkness. You know, this was also used in Circle of the Moon, and a few other songs from this game as well, yet people aren't bashing that soundtrack. Why would anyone compare Symphony of the Night with Castlevania 64? And, well, that's all people ever did. The music's not as good, the story's not as good, and so on. Just because they both share the Castlevania name, the comparisons stop there. A 2D adventure. This was on the Nintendo 64, Konami's first foray into a 3D adventure. Two completely different experiences that should never be compared. Now, I don't compare Tekken to Smash Brothers. They are nothing alike aside from the fact that you fight in both games. Different genres should not be compared to each other. Now, let's talk about the soundtrack. First off, these are two completely different composers with two very different styles. It has that sweet CD quality, so technically it does sound better, and there's more emphasis on powerful orchestrated sounds with plenty of rock and guitar. The music is made to make the game feel like an exciting action adventure, because that's what it is, and it works for that game. There's a lot going on, a lot of fighting and so forth. 64, it's atmospheric, and it's pretty spooky at times. It has the whole gothic horror thing going on, so why would anyone expect some bombastic music for this one? Instead, we get amazing mood pieces that fit the environments. And if you actually listen to the soundtrack before bashing it, how could you even say it's bad? Let's talk about the controls. It gets the most hate, I think. Camera angles can be wonky. The platforming is unnecessarily difficult. I mean, as a kid, I had no issues with this, so I'm not sure what people are really talking about. There are no mistakes with the controls in this game as long as you know what you're doing and are confident with your skills. This part here is a good beginner's trap, and people could blame it on the controls for being so difficult, but just watch. So just let your right thumb be the guide. As long as you jump in the general direction of any of the ledges while holding down the A button, you will automatically grab on, every time. Going up, or going down, just drop to the level below you while holding that A button. Simple. Now what about the camera? I mean, most first generation 3D attempts have pretty bad camera mechanics, but if you keep rocking that R trigger, the camera will fix itself forward, except for certain moments in the game. This was fixed in Legacy of Darkness, but in this game, you don't battle with the camera. Focus on the enemies. And if the enemy is behind the camera, just look in that general direction and attack. Most N64 games were like this. None of them really had perfect camera. Okay, so what makes Castlevania 64 a great game? It actually has vampires. You know, the whole premise of such games. There's plenty of things to love, well, outside of the soundtrack, but I also like that the two characters have different gameplay. And if you play Legacy of Darkness, you have 4 characters, all with different stories and gameplay elements, though Reinhardt and Carrie are rather similar. I always liked the Malice character. The younger me always thought it would be a great cosplay. It's 20 years later, I think I'm too old for that, so maybe I'll go with Vincent at some point. One thing I really love about this game is the mood. It's unlike anything else. For example, that garden maze, it's terrifying. So you can actually trigger this Frankenstein monster chainsaw guy before the actual chase if you find him. And then you can come here and he'll freeze. But you can attack him and get some chicken. I really love this guy, it's so random. The enemies are great in general. Lots of cool vampires, those tarantula ladies, lots of bizarre and creepy designs. All of it makes me think of this as more of a classic monster movie, you know, with Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, Wolfman, whereas others in the series are much more action-oriented. I mean, there's all the classic Castlevania elements like platforming and boss battles, but entering that villa, it breaks up the action and slows things down a bit. Of course, a legendary whip is in this game. With Reinhardt, he's a descendant of the Belmont clan. But Carrie, she uses energy to attack, and that was pretty unique back then. As long as you have a handle on the controls and don't rush the game, you won't have too many issues. Although there is that one part in the castle center, you know, where you pick up the nitro and can't bump into anything or jump. Yeah, I'll admit that's pretty tough, but just be patient, understand your surroundings, and, well, stick with it. Later stages are no joke either, though. People act like challenging games are a bad thing. What I really like about this game are the different secrets you can find, but also that the final stage has optional bosses depending on certain requirements made. That's great. A lot has been said about Castlevania 64. It's the black sheep of the Castlevania series, I feel like. But I don't know. I mean, I always enjoyed it, and I never understood the hate. I do think it's one of the greatest N64 games, and I'm not just saying that. I would put it up there with Ocarina of Time. Though if you asked me, Mystical Ninja or Mischief Makers are better than that game. Now, does the game have bad camera and controls? Only if you let it. I've experienced plenty of other games with worse camera and controls, but not a lot of people speak about them. You're supposed to enjoy this game for what it's supposed to be, not what you want it to be. We all have nostalgic or fond memories of most of these games being masterpieces, but have you actually gone back and played them? Do they still hold up? For example, does Ocarina really hold up in comparison to Breath of the Wild? Well, I think it does. And, well, I would play this game over any other 3D Castlevania game. Is that crazy? Maybe to some, but judge a game based on your own experiences, not what people have said on the internet. Or perhaps you did play it and still hated it. And then, for those people, well, I can't say much. Games are subjective after all.